What's going on, everybody? Welcome to my 2.8 Spiral Abyss guide. This Abyss is crazy in comparison to the past few because they tried really hard to shut everyone down who wasn't using a Pyro. This is meant to be Yoimiya and Klee and Kazuha's Abyss. So as a free-to-play player, if you don't have a lot of Pyro options, you might be in a little bit of trouble. But with that being said, a lot of the meta teams that they tried to nerf this Abyss by making all of the enemies like resist that sort of damage are still pretty good just because of how strong they are. That being said, I do know that these aren't the best teams for Abyss, but as always with free-to-play friendly Abyss guys, your roster is pretty restricted, so you have to find ways to make do with what you have. But I guess I'm just saying no need to backseat, guys. I know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to make this guide universally accessible to everyone. Now, with that being said, this video is going to be super long, and it took a lot of effort to make. So if you guys enjoy this video, if it teaches you anything, or if it helps you clear Abyss, or at least understand what you need to do to clear Abyss, make sure to leave a like on the video and consider subscribing to the channel. We're almost to 100K, and actually let me know in the comments below. I want to know if this Abyss guide helped you, because it helps me figure out how I can make these even better for the next time. Timestamps are also in the description, and with all that being said, my name is Braxophone, and let's clear the Spiral Abyss. In case you want to see what I'm running for all of my builds, I'm going to go over them as quickly as I can, but if you want to just skip ahead to the Abyss section, feel free to. Alright, so for my teams and builds, I'm using 2 teams today. We're not going to be using 3, even though that would be a lot easier. I just want to make it so this is more accessible to everyone. So the first team we're using is Taser, Sucrose, Xingqiu, Official, and Beto. Basically revolves around Electro charge damage and debuffing enemies with Iridescent Venerer, and swirling damage as well. And then you have Reverse Mount Quick Swap. This is basically going to be huge damage from Xiangling, huge damage from Rosaria, huge damage on Kaya, and Bennett to help supply the huge damage by using his buff. Overall, I think this team's a lot of fun. It's one of my favorites, and I like to use it even when it's not very good in certain content. As for builds, one thing to be aware of, guys, is that even though these are going to be all 4-star characters with 4-star weapons, you can see some of these are going to be gacha weapons. And on top of that, I can't really do anything about the constellations. I mean, this is just what my account's racked up over time, and there's nothing I can really do about it. The teams are still fully functional at Constellation 0. They just get better with Constellation, so that's something to keep in mind. But you should still be able to clear with these if you've invested highly into your characters. So on Sucrose, we have Sacrificial Fragments. This is going to be an Elemental Mastery main stat book. You could also, if you're free to play and don't have sac frags, you can use something like Mappa Mare instead. This is a free-to-play craftable, and it gives you elemental mastery, so you have that to help your Sucrose deal more swirl damage. Same deal here. We have 4-piece Iridescent Venerer. It's triple elemental mastery, Constellation 6, talent level 6, 11, 10. As for Xingqiu, we have Sacrificial Sword, R5, 2 Gladiator, 2 Heart of the Depths. This is just for damage. And then we have Attack, Hydra Damage, Crit Damage. As you can see over here, we have 43, 198. So our crit ratio is actually really, really bad, but there's nothing we can do about it because I just don't have enough crit rate pieces to make this good. So, but we are 177 ER, which is pretty solid. Then Constellation 6 again, and then 11111, which is basically 188 with constellations. And then we have Official. Official is going to be kitted out with a free-to-play weapon that we got from an event in the past. She's 55, 116, and she's using Fading Twilight R5. The reason I'm using this is because I don't have Prototype Crescent fully maxed, but also this weapon's not so bad. It's a decent placeholder, and the damage bonus is pretty good. There are better options, like Prototype Crescent is going to be better, especially if you get that headshot, but Fading Twilight's fine. Another option I had was Hamayumi. And then I'm using 2 Gladiators, 2 Shimenawa. We have Attack, Electro Damage, Crit Rate, Constellation 6, and then 8, 11, 7. Beto, we've got 56, 102. So again, the crit ratio, not super highly invested. Prototype Archaic R5, level 90, 4-piece emblem, and we're actually using another Attack, Electro Damage, Crit setup. And you could use Energy Recharge on Beto, but with Official, you just don't really need it as much. We have 158 ER, and we have our burst almost up on cooldown. The only time we don't is in single target, so it's mostly fine. Constellation 6, 1, 8, 10. Now moving on to our Bennett, we have a terrible crit ratio, but that doesn't really matter. 250 ER, just so that we can get our burst up as often as possible. Festering Desire, which is a free-to-play event weapon that happened a long time ago. I hope they bring it back, but I don't think they're going to. If you don't have Festering Desire, you can go ahead and use something like Favonius or Sacrificial, and you should hopefully have one of these 3 by AR55 or so. But if you don't, that's mad unlucky. 4-piece Noblesse, Energy Recharge, Pyro Damage, Crit Rate. The only reason I give him Pyro Damage and Crit Rate is because I don't feel like the healing is super necessary. He already heals about 4K per tick. Without any healing, healing bonus, and so I'd rather just have him plop down an extra 30 to 50k damage every time I burst. So I do that. I have him C6. A lot of people don't like activating C6. That's for another video. Talents, we have him crowned on his burst just so we can get the most healing and the most damage bonus. Xiangling, 41, 159. Now, the reason this is okay, it's not perfect, but it's okay, is because we have the 12% crit rate from the catch. This is going to be the R5 catch, gives you elemental burst damage, and has an energy recharge main stat, so it helps out Emblem with more damage. We have about 228 energy recharge on her. Now, we are using energy recharge sands. It's not your max damage potential. You could use elemental mastery sands or attack sands, and that would be better, but I just wanted to make sure that I had her burst up at all times, so I went with energy recharge, pyro damage crit. Constellation 6 and 1711. Rosaria, 55, 106, 130 ER. We're using on our Dragon's Bane, so for the reverse melt, she'll get a little bit of bonus damage against Pyro. Other options you have for her is you can give her like Favonius Lance, or you can give her any like the Battle Pass stuff. Wavebreaker's Fin is also pretty good if you have it leveled. The catch is also good, but we have that on Xiangling right now. And then as far as sets, I gave her Noblesse and Blizzard Strayer just to max out her damage. We have attack percent, cryo damage, crit rate. You can give her an EM Stance too, but with Dragon's Bane, you don't really need it. And then we have her C6. Talents are going to be 6, 7, 9. Then we have Kaya, a completely free-to-play unit, 60, 113 with 240 ER. You don't actually need that much, but it's kind of helpful to have Favonius on him. My damage was a little bit lower than I would have liked it to have been, but the energy recharge stat is good on him because it gets his burst up fast, and then obviously he's going to crit a lot, so he's going to get those extra white particles you can feed into Xiangling or Rosaria or just whoever needs it, and so that's why I opted for Favonius. But then again, if you have something like Festering Desire, that can work. Sacrificial, those can all work. Lion's Roar is also pretty good. Amenoma is really good if you get that to 92, because this one will make it so that you get energy back after using his burst. There's lots of different options. And I just give him Emblem and Echoes so that you can get some energy recharge and attack percent. Attack percent, cryo damage, crit rate. We did get him Constellation 4 after playing this game for over a year and a half and buying him from the shop, but none of these are really doing anything except for slightly increasing damage and then increasing the length of his burst a little bit. And then 11-8 is what we're dealing with. Oh my god, that was so much talking. All right, let's get into it. So on floor 11, I decided to go with Reverse Melt Quick Swap on the first side because Thunder Manifestation is a pain to kill with standard Taser, since only 2 characters on that team can deal damage to it. I know there's some immunities on both sides, but with the Pyro damage bonus, Xiangling should be able to carry the Cryo immunities. For Taser, Viridescent Venom should carry Electro as well. When you're making your own team, Pyro characters are insane this Abyss. Actually, in general, this Abyss is 100% catered to Pyro characters, so your Klee, Yanfei, Diluc, Yoimiya, Xiangling, Bennett, and Hu Tao are all going to be really strong right now. And if that Xinyan story quest inspired you, you can also play Mono Pyro Xinyan and she's pretty good. You don't have to follow these teams exactly, but if you run something that's not Pyro, you are gonna have a harder time. So just as a heads up, I'm not a perfect player, and there's a lot of RNG that can happen with enemy attacks, so there's going to be some hits to the ley line in these clips. This is mostly just to give you an idea of the safest steps to take. On the first side, quickly hit the slimes to get their attention. Also, make sure that you don't stand on the ley line at the start, because the big slimes are going to jump and you don't want them to land on it and deal damage. This wave in general is pretty easy with Bennett and Xiangling, so there's not really a lot of thought that needs to go into it. In the next wave though, there will be Cryo and Hydro Specters. These guys actually just got nerfed, so they can be moved by Animo and in general are less tanky. The Spiral Abyss starts you facing east according to the minimap, so the Specters to the north or on your left from when you start will automatically target you. The Specters on the other side though will target the ley line. So to fix this, you basically just want to go to the south side or the right side from when you spawn and attack those Specters first. The other Specters will find their way to you and ignore the ley line, so you don't really have to worry about it taking damage. Now in the third wave, Meteorals will sprint at you after spawning, and as a result, they'll usually clip the ley line if you're near it. The thing is, it's pretty hard to get them all to not hit it, so just focus on minimizing damage to it and you should be fine. Bring them away from the ley line once you get their attention. Remember, time does not matter on this floor, so you can farm up your burst for the next one. On the second half, the easy way to think about it is that the ranged guys will target you and the melee ones will go for the ley line. What I do here is stand off to the side of the ley line so they don't constantly toss damage at it, and I spend time trying to group the melee ones and disrupt them from hitting it with Sucrose. For this side, it's a bunch of rinse and repeat. Farm your burst if you can since time doesn't matter, and you should be able to pass without the ley line being below 60. And then you're on to the next floor. Now here's where you might struggle a tiny bit with reverse melt if you don't have a built Xiangling. Because I've invested a lot into my Xiangling and Bennett, their talents and their artifacts, we can deal high damage even without Rosaria and Kaya dealing damage to every single enemy. But for the most part, Rosaria and Kaya are sort of just batteries for Xiangling. Xiangling really is just carrying this entire team for this Abyss. Once you get to the second half with the two Bishops, the Bishops will go down super easy by comparison. Once you get the Spectres taken care of, the floor is basically done. All you have to do is drop your burst and do your normal rotation with reverse melt quick swap, and the Bishops are dead. Now the second half of 11-2 is just target priority. You want to target the Hydro Fatui first because he heals everyone, and try to take him down before he gets his shield up because Hydro shields are pain. Once he's down, focus the Cryo one. Once all three are down, you're going to spawn 3 more enemies, and you want to go focus on the Cryo Sisson Mage. They're going to be the biggest pain in the butt, and so if you get them down first, you don't really have to worry about as much pain. And overall, these guys don't have too much health, so it should be a pretty easy floor. And then you're on to 11-3. Okay, so this floor is both bad and good. The bad is that the Thunder Manifestation never wants to stop moving. But the good news is that he's on the first half, so if you get some nutty RNG movements, you can actually just restart really easily, and it's not that big of a hit. There's nothing too crazy about this one, just know there's a point in his HP he can't go past until he enrages. So towards the start of the fight, make sure not to burn everything if you have trouble restoring that energy, because you can't kill him that fast anyways. He stops you until he's enraged. Other than that, it's just dodging, and I would definitely recommend using your burst to dodge certain attacks if you see them coming. Now for the second half, if you brought an Anemo like Kazuha or Sucrose, you can swirl all 3 of the shields together like I do. If you have trouble doing that, you can always go over to a wall, and eventually they'll follow you over and get closer together. Now this is where having a Pyro is handy, because if you have a Pyro, you can destroy most of those shields. The only one you'll have trouble with is Hydro, and even then it's not going to be that bad. But as long as you have Pyro, Anemo, or just multiple elements, that floor will be pretty easy. The damage check isn't that high, and the mages die quick. And with that, you should be basically done with floor 11, get that 9 stars, and move on to floor 12. So to clear floor 12, we're going to be using the same teams as we did 11. The main reason is that I wanted to make this fairly accessible to most players, and by using even more characters than 8, I'd be limiting the amount of players who could copy exactly what I'm doing. With that being said, there are a few issues with the Abyss this time around. The first floor is going to give enemies an elemental aura, and that aura massively increases their defense. What that means is that you need to be able to clear them of their aura to maximize damage. For example, the first half gives a cryo aura, and so Pyro teams would be effective in multiplying your damage while clearing the aura at the same time. You'll notice that there's a cryo hypostasis on the second floor as well, and to beat that, we're just going to bring an invested Bennett and Xiangling, because that's going to be more than enough to take him out since he has a permanent cryo aura. As for the second half, the only reason that Taser is going to work is because of Iridescent and Swirl Elemental application. While it's not the most efficient team, it can still get the job done fairly well. The biggest downside is that the third floor has a Ruin Snake, which is a massive pain in the ass, a huge time waster, and he's a single target enemy, so you can't really take full advantage of Beto's burst bounce that deals extra damage. Taser is just suffering on floor 12-3. But anyways, let's get right into it. Now the first half of 12-1 gives everyone a cryo aura, and it's a bunch of smaller enemies. Basically, the only thing you want to make sure that you are doing for this floor is moving to the outside of whatever group you're attacking. So you can group up all of the mobs without an Anemo character by moving to the outside of that tiny group, and you can see that I do this a few times because it gets everyone together so you can hit them all with your bursts, and especially on reverse melt quick swap where only Xiangling's burst is able to move around, you kind of need to make sure they're all in one place. Now I will say the Sombra Thaumaturls, you want to get rid of them early because they're a huge pain in the butt and they'll spawn icicles beneath you, and it's just not a very good time. And the ranged Hilichurls, you don't want to let them get too separated from the group. In a worst case scenario, you run to the ranged Hilichurl and you bring all of the other guys with you. They'll all follow you over there because those guys can be a pain in the butt. They can lower your stamina, they can make you run slow, all that sorts of stuff. Lastly, once you clear the south side of enemies, a bunch of larger enemies are going to spawn and they're going to charge right for you. One's like a Giga Chad Hilichurl, and there's other Metachurls as well. To make this really easy on yourself, if you haven't killed all of the other enemies, try to group them all up in that one spot. But if you are only facing the big guys, you want to bring them over to a wall. This is basically just going to make it so that even when they charge, they're not able to go super far away from you, and you can keep them within range of your burst. Lastly, I didn't really show this, but if you do want to make sure that the next floor is really easy, you can save Xiangling and Bennett's burst so that when you start the Cryo Cube in 12-2, you'll be able to chunk a bunch of its health right off the bat. Now on the second half, everyone's going to have an Electro infusion, and it again is a huge pain in the butt. But if you run to the side of these three samurai, you can actually group them all up towards each other. They will all be in a straight line, and you can pull them together with someone like Sucrose, or you can just hit them closer together. That's what I like to do. Overall, these guys should die fairly fast. If you're using 4-piece Viridescent Venerer, you should be able to debuff them enough to where even with the Electro Aura constantly going on, you shouldn't be losing too much damage potential. Then after that, you have the big samurai, and those guys are enemies you'll have to be really careful with. So what you're gonna need to do is run over to one of them. The one across the room will charge at you, so just be watching him from the background and make sure that you can dodge that because they hit ridiculously hard. The main thing with these guys is you can take them over to a wall. That will help a little bit, but you mostly just want to see if you can bring them together at all times, so that way you can kill them at the same time. If you don't defeat them at the same time, one of them is going to take all of the energy from the previous one, gain a bunch of health, and become someone that is unstunnable and hits even harder, and you don't want to deal with that. And because this is on the second half of the Abyss, it can be a bit of a pain in the butt to have to reset, but sometimes with Taser you can run into issues where one will die before the other. Just pay attention to both their health bars, try to balance it out, and kill them at the same time. And once you've finished them both off, it's time for the next floor. Now for the cryohypostasis thing, the first thing the cryohypostasis is going to do is just run away from you. Like completely the opposite direction of where you are, he's just going to go all the way over there. So when you run up to him in the center of the room, keep running, he's going to go backwards. After that, just pay attention to his attacks. At the end of every attack, he should become vulnerable. So if you know when they're going to end, you can plop down Bennett's burst and then Xiangling's burst, and as soon as he becomes vulnerable, he'll take a ton of melt damage from Xiangling. If you need extra battery, don't be afraid to use Rosaria and Kaya, because even though they don't do any damage to the cryohypostasis, they still generate particles. Now, when the Cryo Cube is about to die, he'll generate a ton of shield for himself and send out a bunch of spikes. There'll only be 3 of them, and you have a limited time to hit them back at the cube. In order to hit them back, you have to hit them with a charge shot or an aim shot from the bow. If you use a bow, it actually doesn't even have to be fully charged. You can just literally do an aim shot that is not completely charged, and it will instantly send it back. But the key is that the Cryo Cube will shoot those spiked balls at you, depending on where you're at in the map. So if you're right next to him, he'll actually shoot some of them in close proximity, which means that you can hit all 3 of them back at him, and you don't even necessarily have to wait for a second wave of them. You can literally do all 3 in the short time that you have. So definitely stand right next to the Cryo Cube when he goes into this phase. And once you've gotten his shield down, just use Xiangling burst or just use Bennett or whoever you ended up bringing with you, and he should die fairly quick. Now, as for the second half, this half is actually not too bad either. There's going to be 3 ruin enemies, and 2 of them are the triangles that will leave if you get too close to them. So what I like to do is go to one of them and hit them with some skills and generate some particles, and usually that will disable them if they're charging an attack when you hit them. And then I like to run over to the other one and be on the outside of it so that when it teleports backwards, it's actually grouping itself up with the other ruin enemies. Once you've done that, you just kind of fight them all in one place, and just make sure that you don't get too close to any of the triangle enemies or they will blast themselves away from you. Outside of that, once they're grouped, it's really easy. After that, a big ruin grater is going to spawn, and 2 of the little ruin snakes are going to spawn, and you're basically going to run over to the ruin grater so that way he doesn't charge across the room. The closer you are to him, the less likely he is to do that. And so once you get close to the wall and close to the ruin grater, ideally what's going to happen is that the snake things are going to go underground and teleport over to you, and then you can hit all 3 of them together. But sometimes the snakes will just refuse to group up. You can try to move further out of range, but sometimes it just won't happen. At that point, you either need to reset or just force it once everything else is dead, as you can see I did in my footage. It's a pain, but sometimes the AI is wonky and things don't go as intended. Other than that, the second half with Taser is really easy, and hopefully you were able to nab 3 stars on it, so we can move on to the next one, 12-3. Okay, so 12-3 has a bit of a method to it. The first half of 12-3 has a Mirror Maiden and 2 Cryo Fatui Gunners. Now the catch is within the blue circle of the Mirror Maiden, if you get hit with Hydro, your cooldowns get insanely long. And so you have to sort of play around that a little bit. It doesn't tick too often, but be careful how long you spend in that circle. Because the Mirror Maidens teleport a lot, what I like to do is wait one time, wait for their first teleport, and right as they're starting to teleport, I run into their new location, then start using all of my skills and bursts because they're unlikely to step out right away, right after that. I just have found that to be the most effective, is to wait until she's already done it once and immediately go in to try to get as much damage as you can. Something else to note is that Bennett will cleanse you of your waters debuff that basically makes your cooldown super long. The only problem is that if a thing is already on cooldown, Bennett can't fix it. He can only fix it if you haven't used the cooldown yet. So Bennett's cleanse isn't that useful, but yeah, basically it's just about finessing the Fatui mage. She ends up being a huge pain in the butt, but if you can get rid of her, the gunners are super easy. You can also opt to lure the gunners out of the area, but the thing is the mage is always walking towards you, so the odds are that you're not going to be able to kill the Fatui gunners as quickly as you would like to without potentially getting hit by slowing waters, and that's a huge pain. Do remember that this is the first half of Abyss, so if something goes horribly wrong, you can just reset and you'll be right at the Mirror Maiden floor again. You want to make sure that you have a high amount of time left for the Ruin Snake because he's underground a lot of the fight, so I think it's worth resetting if you don't clear it within the first minute and a half or so, unless you just have a really stacked team on the second side. Now, once you get to the Ruined Snake side, there's only a couple things you have control over. The snake's AI seems to do random things. There may be a pattern to it, but I haven't been able to figure it out. Sometimes he goes underground, sometimes he just sticks above ground for a really long time, sometimes he rolls at you, and basically you're just fighting a normal boss. The only thing that you can do to really help you kill the Ruined Snake faster is timing your bursts when you know he's coming out of the ground and staying out of the ground, and shooting the Ruined Snake cores. Now, this is not something that I was able to do because I have massive skill issue, but a friend Rin Taicho was able to show me exactly what you need to do to stop the Ruined Snake and get him stunned when he's doing certain attacks.
Okay, you see on the sides here, it's these 4 cores right here. They also show up on the other end of the snake, but these start to glow when he starts going into that phase. So the thing you can do is just start spamming in those directions.
Says hello, Rin.
Like that. Then you fall down.
When he does certain attacks, you'll see cores light up, and if you shoot every one of those cores, it'll effectively stun the Ruined Snake. Now, it is very hard to shoot those cores when he's moving a lot, but if you can manage to do it, it'll stun him and basically give you a massive DPS window. Also, if you want to see the most insane cracked out gamer gameplay you've ever seen in your entire life, go check out Rin's stream. The link will be in the description. Now, there's also certain characters that can hit the Ruined Snake while he's underground. Those are going to be your auto turret characters like Fischl and Yoimiya, for example, and they won't hit 100% of the time, but they'll just steal a little bit of extra damage, so they can be pretty helpful for that floor. Now, other than that, it's kind of just how fast did you clear the first half, because the Ruined Snake will waste a lot of your time, and some runs he'll waste more time than others. It's really unfortunate that this is the direction Spiral Abyss is taking, but there's nothing you can really do about it, except for reset if it doesn't work. But if you do master the core thing, you'll get a bunch of uptime for your team, and that will help you kill it a lot faster. Now, as I said before, Taser is a little bit less optimal on this side than it is on the first side, at least for 12-3 specifically, because if you use Taser on the first half of 12-3, you'll have a lot easier time taking out the multiple enemies, and then you'll have Reverse Melt for the Ruined Snake. That is something that you can choose to do after you've gone through Abyss the first time. Once you've cleared the first 2 floors, you can just rerun this, and the stars you get on the first 2 floors won't matter. You can just swap your teams over, so you'll have an easier time with 12-3. There is no shame in not being able to one-shot this with 9 stars. You can always switch your teams just for a specific floor, because at the end of the day, it's just about clearing. It's not about how you clear. Hopefully you can defeat floor 12 with a total of 9 stars. As you can see, we were able to do it with 4-star characters, 4-star weapons, and a little bit of luck. As I said at the start, these teams are a little inefficient for Abyss, but there's not really any meta teams aside from ones that use 5 stars that have a super easy time clearing this Abyss. So this will be a really interesting one for people to theorycraft and come up with really specific new teams for. But in the meantime, this is what we have to deal with it on the 100% 4-star side. And if you have more investment invested 4-stars that are not on this list, you may find that you can use a team other than Reverse Melt Quick Swap or Taser to be able to clear with no issues. But anyways, I hope that this video helped you guys out. There is a lot of information to take in about this Abyss, and there's a lot of things you can change and a lot of things you can't even really counter that the Abyss just throws at you this time around. It's definitely more challenging than the last one. But if you guys have enjoyed, if you did learn something, let me know in the comments down below, and consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It tells YouTube that the video doesn't suck, and we're almost to 100k subs. It would be super awesome if we could get there by the end of summer. Thanks for watching, everyone, and good luck with your Abyss.